Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends and subscribers, I'd like to focus on the new document that has been published almost 2 weeks ago, National Security Strategy of the United States. But not all of it, because this is a fundamental, one could even say historical document of 33 pages only, but specifically on two issues that are of great concern of mine. And that is the policy of the United States to Russia, Ukraine war, and Europe. There are many, many other interesting topics to which I may come back later on, specifically the domestic policy in the United States, the reindustrialization, very interesting aspects about policy to China and to Latin America. But let me first address those, because these are at the center of current affairs, specifically in regard to the war in Ukraine and a possible peace settlement. Now, quintessentially, this is Trump. When you read the text attentively, you realize that this is either written by Trump or by someone who follows his ideas very attentively. This is very much a product of Trump's thinking about the world and America in it. And this is why this document is so serious and so valuable, is because it's not about today's policy. This is a worldview. This is the way Trump and to some extent Vance, his ideas could be seen there as well. This is the way they perceive the world, and this is how they want to address the issues confronting the United States. Now, what is the theme that is most striking and most important in this document is globalization. In any respect that you could look at it, it is a protest against globalization. I remember about 25 years ago, globalization was very popular. The United States elites believed at that time that globalization worked for the United States. The most fashionable words were open markets, the no tariff trade, that everything was supposed to work for the United States. They were supposed to win in the globalization, which means open, unimpeded flows of capital, labor, investment. America was supposed to benefit. Well, even then, there were few voices that were saying that globalization was killing America, in a sense that the capital flew out of America to places where it was cheaper to produce, such as China and other Asian countries. And now, 25 years later, finally, we have an American president who says quite openly, globalization is wrong. And I now will quote to you verbatim what some of the things that are said in the document about the globalization. Criticizing the early approach, it says, but to focus on everything is to focus on nothing. America's core national security interests shall be our focus. In sum, not only did our elites pursue a fundamentally undesirable and impossible goal, in doing so, they undermine the very means necessary to achieve that goal, the character of our nation upon which its power, wealth, and decency were built. So, of course, he blames uncontrolled immigration, capital flight, and indeed, globalization comes as a major enemy. Now, that's the overall framework, but the harsh words are reserved of all the places in America's partners and allies and the foes are reserved for Europe. And that echoes some of the things that Vice President Vance said at the Munich Security Conference in February 2025, this year. And again, not to be paraphrasing, but I read specific quotes from the document regarding Europe. The larger issues facing Europe include activities of the European Union and other transnational bodies that undermine political liberty and sovereignty. So, very important, European Union as an organization is seen as an obstacle to European development. I quote, migration policies that are transforming the continent and creating strife, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition, um, cratering birth rates, and loss of national identities and self confidence. All of this, says Trump, leads to erasure, which means destruction, effacing of Europe in the forthcoming times. Quote, many of these nations are currently doubling down on their present path. Quote, they allowed allies and partners to offload the cost of their defense onto the American people and sometimes to suck us into conflicts and controversies central to their interests but peripheral and irrelevant to our own. This sums up pretty much what the national security strategy document says about Europe. Europe is on the wrong path because of the same things that were wrong in America, which means uninhibited open immigration, the liberal values that are going overboard with the woke culture, and then abdication of national governments of their sovereignty in favor of transnational, i.e., globalist organizations such as the European Union. Uh, so, another quote, fairness, allies should defend themselves. You can do it. That is the message. The United States will not forever be paying for the defense of the European partners. They can afford to do it themselves. This is a clear message. I quote, our goal should be to help Europe correct its current trajectory, ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. So here again, this is a historical departure from any other president or any other administration in the past. The holiest of the holy cows was NATO and the transatlantic partnership. Now we see basically a historical rift between the United States or current administration in the United States that sees that the goal of America first contradicts the continued military alliance with Europe because it is not central to what the national document strategy defines as American core interests. And American core interest is America and then Latin America or Western Hemisphere and then Middle East and only then Europe. In other words, Europe is delegated to the alliance, which would be nice to support by the Europeans, not by the United States. Now, to put it in different terms, one could say that there is a significant rift between the Atlantic partners on values, specifically the values of economic priorities, of immigration, of woke culture, of disregard to religion, because it's pretty much dying in Europe. Now, the Europeans have been, and the defense burden, that's another issue of rift, and of course of economic competition. And here there's some kind of a contradiction, I think, in the document in regard to Europe and other parts of the world, but specifically Europe, is that on the one hand, Trump declares that he wants a stronger Europe to defend itself and to be a good partner to the United States, but he doesn't see it as being accomplished through the European Union or any transnational organization. In other words, Trump really prefers to deal with independent, separately, independent European powers that would pursue the agenda that is close to that of Trump, which means ending immigration, restoring freedom of speech, restoring free and fair elections, which he believes are manipulated in some of these countries. So it's a very, very serious, one could even say historical rift between the United States and Europe. The Europeans have reacted angrily to this. They've denounced Trump, and they declared their independence. And Merz been particularly outspoken, and von der Leyen, and the European Commission in general, European Council, everybody was saying, don't mess with Europe. We are going to do our own way. But at the same time, they realize they're pitifully dependent on US and on NATO. And specifically, this is clear in their separate and different policy to Ukraine. Now, a few words about Ukraine, and that is to start with, Ukraine is not defined as in America's core interest. And therefore, the policy is clearly seen to offload Ukraine to the shoulders of Europeans. That's their continent. Let them deal with it and let them pay for it. But about the payment, there's again a fundamental difference. The Europeans don't have the money to pay for it, as I discussed in my last video, and they want to take the Russian money for propelling the war of Ukraine, and or its reconstruction if peace is established. Now, the American approach is different. The American approach is that Europeans should pay for it, for American weapons, and preferable it is to conclude peace. And when peace is concluded, it should be Russian money should be used jointly by Russia and the United States in order to reconstruct Ukraine. That's, of course, also from the Russian perspective, a very sort of suspicious type of approach. That the Russians are not going to get the money anyway. Either the Europeans are going to confiscate it, as they're trying to do, or according to Trump proposal, at least half of it would go into a fund of reconstruction of Ukraine, from which the Americans are going to draw benefit. So in any case, this is the contradiction between the policies of the United States and Europe. It is a core interest of the United States, I quote, to negotiate an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine in order to stabilize European economies, prevent unintended escalation or expansion of the war, and to reestablish strategic stability with Russia. So that's the goal of the United States. From here, it follows the United States is not going to provide security guarantees to Ukraine. They would want Europeans to do so and take these risks and burdens. It also follows that Trump is serious about concluding the Ukraine war, even if it means that the Russia's core interest in it is satisfied, even if it means to end the expansion of NATO and to reload the weight of defense spending onto the European countries. So this is the very briefly about the attitudes and values and policies as far as Europe is concerned. I just want to add a couple of words about the other parts briefly. It says in the national doctrine that Latin America would be a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The United States should establish its complete and total dominance over Latin America. That may be seen by some Latin American countries as age-old American imperialism, with no difference from the previous administrations, and in fact unchanged from the times of Theodore Roosevelt. So there's nothing new really about that, except that the more aggressive posture about treating the entire America as the sphere for American capital. Now, about China, there are very cautious words, basically supporting Taiwan and signaling to the Chinese that nothing that the United States is not going to seek confrontation, but at the same time, it is going to support Taiwan militarily and will not accept any attempts of the Chinese to take it over. But in terms of the economy, the document sees tremendous strides that China has made in economic activity and economic progress, and it is willing to cooperate and compete in peaceful ways. At least that's what the document says, and that is perceived favorably by the Chinese. Um, and finally, there's a very interesting block of policies and the description of problems concerning the reindustrialization of the United States. But it is so interesting and so important that I will come back to it in a different video because it raises the fundamental question as to whether Trump's agenda can be implemented. Okay, this is it for today, my dear friends. I urge you to subscribe, to read my books, not only to read my books from Lenin to Putin, but also my other books on the Russian Revolution and the Civil War, and my several playlists on European history, Soviet history, Russian history, and so on. I wish you happy holidays in the coming days, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.